Guys, have you heard about the Red Room in Dark Web? It's a place where humans are tortured live. Here is a true story about the Red Room. It was the night of October 13th, 2017, a date now infamous among dark web explorers. A user known by the handle Shadowseeker stumbled upon a mysterious link while digging through an obscure forum. The link was simply titled Fun Night, but something about it felt off. Curiosity got the better of Shadowseeker, and they clicked. The screen went black for a moment, then flickered to life with a live video feed. The room on the screen was almost empty, except for a single wooden chair in the center. The date and time were displayed in the corner of the screen, marking the moment. October 13th, 11:45 p.m. A chilling message appeared. Welcome to the Red Room. The show begins in 15 minutes. The chat beside the video was already active, with usernames like Bloodlust 199, Torture Master, and Night Hunter 666 filling the space with sickening excitement. They were placing bets, some offering large sums of Bitcoin, guessing what kind of horror would unfold. As the countdown ticked away, Shadowseeker's heart pounded. The timer reached 0, and the screen shifted to show the door slowly creaking open. A terrified young woman, later identified as Emily through disturbing whispers in the chat, was dragged into the room by masked men. Her eyes were wide with fear, and her muffled cries echoed through the room. The chat exploded with commands. Burn her! Cut her! Make her scream! The masked figures seemed to follow the instructions, as though the viewers were in control of the horrific acts that followed. Emily's screams filled the air, and Shadowseeker could barely watch, frozen in horror. As the nightmare unfolded, Shadowseeker noticed something even more chilling. Their own username, Shadowseeker, had appeared in the chat, despite never typing anything. The chat box displayed a single message from them: "You're next." Panicked, they tried to exit the site, but every attempt failed. The screen flickered, and the last thing they saw before the feed cut off was a message that read, "We know who you are. We're coming for you." The next day, Shadowseeker's account vanished from the dark web. Some say they were never seen or heard from again. The Red Room remains a terrifying mystery, a place where the line between viewer and victim blurs, and where one wrong click could seal your fate. My name is Emily, and this is my story. I thought I knew my husband, but the truth is, he's been hiding a terrifying secret. We've been married for 10 years, and everything seemed perfect, until I found something that changed everything. It all started one Saturday afternoon. Mark was out, and I decided to clean up our bedroom. While I was dusting, I noticed something strange. Behind a row of books on the top shelf was a small, locked box. I had never seen it before, and I got curious. I searched through his things and found a tiny silver key hidden in his desk drawer. When I opened the box, my hands were shaking. Inside were papers, photos, and a cell phone I didn't recognize. My heart started racing as I looked through the documents. There was a birth certificate, but it wasn't for Mark. It was for someone named Daniel Foster. Then there were photos of Mark, or at least someone who looked like him, but he had different hairstyles, different clothes, and he was with people I'd never seen before. I turned on the phone, and there was no password. What I found in the messages made me feel sick. The texts were between Mark and a woman named Jessica, but she called him Daniel. They talked about meeting in secret, about lying to me, and about plans I had no clue about. The worst message I read said, "I'm done pretending with Emily. She's getting suspicious. We need to act soon." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might stop. Pretending. Who was Mark, really? What was he planning to do? When Mark came home, I confronted him. I showed him the box, my hands still shaking. His face went pale, but he didn't seem scared. Instead, he just looked at me with cold, empty eyes. "Emily," he said in a flat voice, "you weren't supposed to find out. My real name is Daniel. The life we have, it's just one of many I've lived." He started telling me things that made my blood run cold. He wasn't really Mark. He had been living a double life, and I wasn't the only person he had fooled. He told me about Jessica, how they had done terrible things together. He admitted to lying, stealing, and even worse things. Things too horrible to even think about. I realized I was just another pawn in his twisted game. Then he leaned in close. So close I could feel his breath on my face. His voice dropped to a whisper, and he said, "Emily, you can't tell anyone. If you do, you'll end up like the others." I was frozen with fear. Who were the others? What had he done to them? I was too scared to ask. From that moment, everything changed. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was terrified all the time. Every little sound in the house made me jump. Every time he looked at me, it felt like a threat. I started noticing things I hadn't seen before. How he never let me see his phone. How he sometimes had bruises that he couldn't explain. How he would leave for hours and give me vague excuses about where he'd been. I couldn't stop thinking that he was planning something terrible, something that might mean the end for me. Now, I'm trapped in my own home, living with a man I no longer recognize, scared every single day that he's going to make me disappear, just like he did with the others. Guys, have you heard of the Smiling Man? It is the most scary story from Reddit. This story is about a young man who liked to take long walks at night. He lived in a quiet neighborhood, and one night, around 2 a.m., he went out for a walk. The streets were empty, and everything was calm. But then he noticed something strange. A man was standing far down the street, facing away from him. The young man didn't think much of it, and kept walking. But then, the man started moving in a very odd way. He wasn't walking. He was dancing, kind of like a waltz, but very slow and creepy. The man was smiling, a wide, unnatural smile, and his eyes were wide open. He danced closer and closer, moving towards the young man. Feeling uneasy, the young man crossed the street to avoid the strange dancer. But when he did, the smiling man crossed the street too, still dancing and getting closer. The young man started to feel really scared. He picked up his pace, trying to put more distance between him and the smiling man, but the man kept following him, always smiling and dancing. At one point, the smiling man suddenly stopped dancing and started walking toward the young man, his smile even wider now. Terrified, the young man ran as fast as he could. He didn't look back until he reached his apartment, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Even after reaching safety, the image of that creepy smile and the strange dance haunted him. He never took late-night walks again, always fearing that he might see the smiling man again. True scary story. Title: The Late Night Stalker. I've always been a night owl. The quiet hours after midnight are when I get most of my work done. But one night, working late, would lead to the most terrifying experience of my life. It started on a Wednesday. I was sitting at my desk, typing away at a project that was due the next morning. The only light in the room came from my computer screen. The rest of my apartment was cloaked in darkness, save for the faint glow of the city lights creeping through the blinds. Around 2:30 a.m., I decided to take a break. I stretched, yawned, and headed to the kitchen to grab a snack. As I walked down the hallway, I felt a strange chill. It wasn't cold, more like the sensation you get when someone's watching you. I brushed it off, thinking I was just tired. But as I reached the kitchen, I heard it, a faint sound, like the creaking of a floorboard. It came from the living room. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I live alone, and no one should be in my apartment. Slowly, I peeked around the corner into the living room. Nothing, just the usual furniture, bathed in shadows. I stood there for a moment, listening, but all I heard was the distant hum of the city, trying to shake off the unease. I grabbed a snack and returned to my desk. I sat down, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept replaying that sound. I told myself it was probably just the building settling, or a neighbor moving around. But then, I noticed something strange on my screen. A message box was open. I hadn't touched my keyboard since getting up, and I definitely hadn't opened any new windows. The message was short. "Why don't you check the door?" My heart skipped a beat. Was this some kind of prank? I looked around the room, half expecting someone to jump out at me, but I was alone. The apartment was dead silent. I hesitated, then slowly turned my chair to face the front door. It was closed, just as I had left it, but something was off. The peephole was covered. I hadn't noticed it earlier, but now it was clear. Someone had taped something over the peephole from the outside. My hands trembled as I stood up. I approached the door cautiously, my pulse racing. I reached out to touch the doorknob, but then I heard it. A soft, deliberate knock. 3 slow taps. Whoever was on the other side knew I was there. I backed away, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to open the door, but I also didn't want to just stand there, waiting for whatever was outside to break in. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. As I waited for the operator to pick up, the knocking continued, louder and more insistent. The door rattled in its frame. Whoever was out there was getting impatient. Finally, the operator answered. I quickly explained the situation, my voice shaking. She assured me that officers were on their way and told me to stay on the line. But just as she said that, the knocking stopped. I held my breath, listening. Silence. Then, the sound of footsteps, walking away from the door. I didn't relax until I heard the distant wail of sirens approaching. When the police arrived, they found nothing outside my door, except a small piece of tape covering the peephole. There were no signs of forced entry, no clues as to who had been there or why. The officers advised me to stay somewhere else for the night, which I gladly did, but I never found out who was at my door that night or what they wanted. I moved out of that apartment a month later, but I still get chills every time I hear a knock at the door late at night.